question. You know, I wouldn't, I mean, Canadians will say I'm sorry, but my son tells me that when a Canadian says I'm sorry, what he really means is kiss off. That's really what it means. So there's no need to say you're sorry. Okay, you need to have a plan B. Somebody needs to have a plan B about getting the external examiner into town, and so that's, if there are any concerns, your supervisor should be working with grad studies on that one. In really difficult circumstances, we will sometimes accept a list of questions submitted by the external examiner if they can't make it. So we've had some very odd circumstances where the external examiner has gotten a message on the way to the airport to fly in that her brother's been killed. So what are we going to do? So now, to state the obvious, when you were through with the presentation, you were through with the beginning. Yes?
Before you go to the slide, when you were talking about the presentation, since it's a 20-minute, any advice how it could be balanced, how much the time management in terms of?
So you have 20 minutes to give your presentation. I would not spend a great deal of time in my presentation talking about the literature. Okay, because everybody in the room, with the possible exception of the audience, who won't understand your discussion of the literature anyway, knows about the literature. So you want to be clear about what your question is, you want to be clear about how you approach answering it, and you want to be clear about the results and what they mean.
And also when question answering sessions, and if the committee members are recommending something at the time of presentation, saying that why don't you, or why you haven't done, and you want to write it down.
Yeah.
Is it the right time?
Okay, so first of all, nobody is permitted to interrupt you during your presentation.
No, after the presentation.
Okay, after the presentation, if there are requirements, the usual practice is that your supervisor will write down what their concerns are, and during the in-camera session, then there will be some specification about exactly what has to be done, and usually the supervisor takes notes then. Okay. Yes?
I have a question regarding apologizing for questions and things. If one doesn't understand the question very clearly, is it okay to ask them to...
Absolutely. If you don't understand the question, or if sometimes, oh well, no, you don't need to do that. There's no point in asking the question over and over and over and hope that the message will come to you. That's not going to work. But what you can do, it's perfectly fair to say, I need a moment to think about that. That's perfectly acceptable. And you have 20 seconds to think about it. Now 20 seconds, like 20 seconds is a long time. It's almost the length of the red light at the corner of Connaught and Quinpool. And that's a long light. I thought I'm bitter. I'm going to show you how long 20 seconds is. Okay, that's 10.
It's not awkwardly pausing like that?
No, no. You're okay. If you say, I need a moment to think about that, you can have up to 20 seconds. Okay, you have my permission for 20 seconds. Okay? Unless it's a question like that you should know the answer to right away. Okay? Like, where did you do your undergraduate degree? If you say, I need a moment to think about that, that's not good. No. That's going to raise more questions. So what else can I tell you about that? Yeah, so that's the timing issue. I've seen this a couple of times. The examiner asks a question, and you can see the student peer intently into the faces of everybody thinking, I could read the answer in these faces, I'm sure I can, because I can't think of, you have to think for yourself. And just because they've asked the question, you shouldn't imagine that they know what the answer is. Sometimes they'll ask questions that just come out of the blue, and you have to think about it. Because really what you're trying to demonstrate is your competence to be your the validity of your membership in this community of scholars and the ability to undertake effective discussion in a particular domain. Doesn't mean you have to get it all right, because nobody does. I don't know is a good if you actually don't know. So, picking a fight with the external bad practice. Okay, so one thing that you may not know is that everybody in the room wants you to succeed. Nobody in the room wants you to fail. Because that's very unpleasant for everybody. They want you to succeed. But the reason we have the external examiner is he's there to make sure that the standards of the community, the scholarly community, are maintained. It's in his interest and in our interest to have him come and make sure that those standards are maintained. So you don't want to be like this guy, you know, day before his defense, and he's thinking, I think I should be preparing my presentation. It's a bad practice. Okay, so, do we have any other questions? Do we have any questions, comments? Yes?
I'm just wondering if, how many external examiners you need, like what if you're in the faculty, what if you teach your faculty? Is there something about that that's more than one external?
No. No, there's there's no rule on that front that I know. The external examiner is one external examiner, and that external examiner typically comes from elsewhere in Canada or the United States, possibly Europe. The other examiners, that's a matter of the particular discipline. In most cases, the other examiners in the room belong to the supervisory committee. Now, the reason that we have the question and answer part of it, one of the reasons, is that we don't want the circumstance where a student has paid someone else to write the dissertation, and then they're going to present it. This is meant as an examination to confirm that the student actually understands what this thesis is about, and we increase the likelihood that that student actually did the work himself or herself. Okay, so that's why we have the external. Now, the internal examiner is typically members of the supervisor and members of the supervisory committee, but in the case of chemistry, they have, the supervisor is there, but the other examining members are the members of the faculty. And there's one other member that comes to the meeting, and that is the coordinator, the graduate representative, graduate coordinator of the community, and he's there to make sure that the norms of that particular community are generally speaking observed. He has no vote, but he's there during or he or she is there during the in-camera as well.
Do they
and they may comment.
Do they don't examine though? Do they ask
don't
questions?
examine. No, they don't typically examine. They can ask questions. I usually let the departmental rep ask questions. For the most part, most of them haven't read the thesis. So, yeah, so there's another question back there?
So department rep is just a coordinator?
It could be anybody. Could be anybody from the department, but there is an expectation. We won't proceed without a departmental rep. Yes?
As for the examiners, who chooses them?
The examiners are proposed by the supervisor and or the committee, and they are chosen by grad studies. And so when I was in the job of doing it, now you can appreciate how much I know about most of the disciplines, which is to say nothing, but I am able to read the CV of the proposed examiner, and if the person has not published in 10 years, they're not going to be the external examiner. And I have had an external examiner proposed who was 84 years old. I thought, gee, traveling in Canada in the wintertime for an 84-year-old out of Florida who hasn't published in 15 years, I don't think so. Yes?
To that point, there's a form that you have to fill out
Yes, there
arranging an oral defense
Yes, there is.
in that picture, external examiner. You suggest 3, and then it goes to FGS.
And we are not obliged to choose any one of those 3 either. We have had occasion. The new associate dean is rather tougher than I was doing it. Mike Lee, he looks very carefully at that, and he sometimes sends the form back and says, I need to have another 3 proposed. Yes?
If you've already published papers on your research, do you have any advice on not plagiarizing yourself?
There is a practice, well, first of all, you have to note in the publication that this has already been published, and you have to get copyright release from the journal in which it is published, and there is a forum on the FGS website for that. And there is also a practice at this university, as is the case for many universities, of something called dissertation by manuscript, where what you do is you do a series of connected studies, you publish those connected studies, and then provide transitional descriptions between them, provide an introduction and a conclusion, and that becomes your dissertation, rather than the kind of tome we normally associate with, let's say, French or German or something like that. So there is a practice of that, and it's perfectly acceptable. Just because it's published, though, doesn't mean that it's good enough quality, because there are some journals, which I will not name, that are just nonsense. And everybody who knows anything about the discipline knows that this journal is not a top quality journal, and it's not a tier 2 journal, and it's not a tier 3 journal. And so if you publish there, you're actually undermining your case, because it means you couldn't publish in a real journal. Yes?
Is there a website that lists the characteristics that you're looking for in an external? We're just looking to propose external examiners now. I wasn't able to find anything like that online.
The best we can do is to suggest the form, and the form asks certain questions. Has this examiner published with your supervisor in the last 6 years? Have you done work with this external examiner? So you have to get those answers correct. Or, occasionally, what happens is there are some fields of study that are so narrow that the community is very, very small, and it's almost impossible to find someone who can examine, who hasn't had some kind of a relationship with the people in the room.
So does that include original, I guess, research-based publications, or does that also include review articles and things like that?
Yes, although we're a little bit more forgiving on review articles. Yes?
The same rules apply for the examiners from Dell, or
What do you mean?
to publish with?
Oh, no, well, you can publish with people on the committee. I mean, I don't see that as an issue. That's not, in fact, that's fairly common. Or I should use the legal form, which is the double negative legal, it's not uncommon. Okay. Yes?
So are you saying that if the external examiner co-authors with the supervisor, that's a no-go?
That's a
But
no-go.
what about, say, one of the committee members?
That's a no-go.
That's a no-go as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
We really, really, the full independence of the external examiner is vital to the integrity of the process. Yes?
I have another question about the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. I get the impression that the questions keep going tougher and tougher until the candidate says, I don't know. So is it okay for the person, if they really don't know, not to fabricate answers and then say,
I think as a strategy, fabrication, not likely to be
Not
successful.
fabrication, but thinking on spot. Right?
Well, I mean, thinking on the spot is usually a good practice. I think thinking wherever you happen to be is a good practice. For the most part, I'm in favor of thinking, especially during a defense, if I may say.
Yeah, but like, you mentioned something about not looking for answers in the faces of the committee members, so in that sense, when you're thinking on the spot, you're not really sure whether the answer is reasonably correct. Right?
Well, I mean, you're gonna, if you have something that you think is in the territory and you think is likely correct, then, and you can express your uncertainty. You can say, well, like sometimes you're asked like totally hypothetical questions that are like extending your research, going to the next stage and taking some like really strange